All right. Hello and welcome to another episode of Jake's Takes here on a women's national team night. Actually, I got my USA hat. I'm ready to go watch the game later. But today, before we get to that game, I'm going to go back and look at the NWSL game of the week that we had on Twitter on Off the Post. The game was between the Portland Thorns and the Seattle Reign. This game was kind of it was an interesting game because it was built up as a game where Portland, they have a lot of people who are missing, and they were really given a tough task to with their depth. We were gonna. I'll go to the lineup here in a second, but they're gonna be missing 6 people because they're gonna be at the women's national team game today in Colorado, and so they were missing all those pieces. Seattle, on the other hand, is a team that only loses Hope Solo when they have internationals away. So it was definitely a case of a team that is missing a lot of people versus a team that's at full strength. So it was a bit of a dour affair. Wasn't the greatest spectacle. Another reason Seattle may have had some issues was because they had a midweek game against Arsenal Ladies. I know as a lot of Seattle fans were excited about the game and excited about the matchup because it was the first team from England to come to the U.S. to play a friendly. But at the same time, a lot of MLS teams do the mid-season friendly, and I rail against them because it's right in the middle of your competitive schedule. You're getting a midweek game. Your opponents aren't doing a midweek game, so you're coming off of short rest, especially when you're going right into a rivalry matchup. I didn't see the sense of doing that, but I know a lot of people were interested in it. I think it was not the greatest choice, right into a rivalry game. But I'll let that go, and I'll just get this Jake's take started, and I'll start with the starting lineups as normal. Let's see, we got the Portland Thorns at home, so we'll start with them. This team had a lot of changes. Obviously, we had on the wings in the back, we see Mallory Weber and Megan Morris slotting back in there for the first time this season, really. These are 2 players that we've seen come off the bench, kind of fill in spot services on the attack. And so it was really interesting to see them move back to the defense. I know Morris has been a wing back with Sky Blue in the past, but Mallory Weber we hadn't seen in that wing back position yet. It was a kind of it looks kind of like their normal shape, that 4-2-3-1. Shim and Bourret are back there, and Sinclair's in that number 10 role, Nadia Dadim out on wide one side and Rezo on the other side. But at the same time, it was very reminiscent. I don't know if everyone saw my first Jake's takes, but I did the Sky Blue game versus Seattle in the first weekend, and very similar 4-4-1-1 type of a formation. And Portland kind of flipped back between the 4-2-3-1 and a 4-4-1-1 when they're defending. So you'll see that a little bit better when I have some images from the game pulled up. For Seattle, very much their starting 11 minus Hope Solo, but they've got a very able backup goalkeeper in Haley Kottmeyer. I've added a couple directional arrows because when you see that midfield trio of Winters, Fishlock, and Little, you kind of wonder where their movements are going towards. And for Kim Little, she's kind of given free range. I didn't really put any arrows for her, because you could really put an arrow to go in any direction. But a player like Keelan Winters is a very much stay at home, holding mid, side to side movements. You're really trying to hold possession, break up play. Just Fishlock will slot back to help her out. But she also, and a lot of times in this game, she was pushing forward as a late runner to get on the end of crosses and really push the Portland Thorns defense backwards. So, and one last thing is Merritt Mathias. She's an interesting number 9 because she wasn't really stationary in the middle. She spent a lot of times trying to make runs into the channels. It's kind of an interesting dilemma. You want your players to find that space, but at the same time, when you only have one striker, I always like to have them centrally located because, as you'll see later in the game, you got to have somebody in the middle to put the ball in the goal. So, for me, I think that's a little it's a little frustrating to see a center forward spend so much time on the wing, but that's their game plan. So here's our opening part of the game here. You really can start to see that for the banks of four start to take shape. That line across the midfield. There's Christine Sinclair putting pressure on the ball, and just like that Sky Blue opening game, they really collapsed space in the middle, really took away passing lanes, made it difficult to go right up the gut. So what ended up happening is there was a lot of space wide and in the back. So they spent a lot of times going back to their center backs, playing the ball square, playing it to the wing back, playing it down the line. There's a lot of space wide. The Portland Thorns blocks of four, they were narrow on defense, so it allowed that space wide, but at the same time they couldn't find that penetrating pass through the middle. And as we see in this picture, we've got Nadim, Shim, Wu Rail, and Rezo in that four. And so, again, that kind of highlights what I was saying earlier, is that you can really see the banks of four going on. The wingers are not as highly aggressive as you would see maybe with a Tobin Heath in the lineup. So, really, in this point, their only options are to go up the wing or to try to play a long ball, who, she's looking for a Jess Fishlock, who's, as I mentioned earlier, is really looking to stretch and push forward as well into the attack. And so this ended up being a turnover. So, for the Thorns, that's exactly what you want. The other danger piece for Seattle that they have going forward is when Kim Little gets on the ball in the middle. Again, we see immediately she gets closed down by Celeste Bourrail. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that name, and feel free to correct me in the comments, but I'll go with that pronunciation for now. And as you can see, she had a really good game in my opinion. Really did well sleeping back and making sure that Kim Little had someone trailing her at all points during this game. As you see, she gets forward and there's Merritt Mathias in front of her making that run wide. And that's something I was frustrated about, because she's making that run wide, but you can also see, I believe that's, I think it's Ellie Reed, or maybe it's Carson Pickett actually, who's wide out there. And because Mathias makes that run wide, that takes away the space from Carson Pickett. So unless, she plays that ball there and you combine, you're really not going to penetrate at all. And because you don't have a center forward, I understand you don't want to take the space away from Kim Little, but you're really limiting your attack. And, it's very comfortable when you have that bank of four there and you've got a defensive midfielder trailing for the Thorns to break up that play. So again, Kim Little goes forward, but nothing comes of it. Here we go again. This is actually going to turn into one of the top chances for the Thorns this game. Keelan Winters collects a ball from the wing, and she's going to turn inside and look for a pass. She could try to split those two defenders, but they've really effectively closed down that passing lane. And as you can see, Christine Sinclair is on Jess Fishlock, and Mana Shim is on Kim Little, I believe. So everyone's really tightly marked in that midfield, really closed down well by that Thorns defense. And as you can see, Nadia Nadim and Celeste Bourrail they pinched over, and they're going to close down Keelan Winters on this ball because she's going to take a bad touch, and it'll be closed down by Bourrail, and her deflection will actually go to Christine Sinclair, who's going to turn this defending position into a transition into attack. And as you can see, out wide at the top of the screen underneath the Seattle-Portland scorekeeping time clock, that's a wing back for Seattle, and she's way out of position, and she's about to be punished in a moment once Christine Sinclair gets on the ball and starts moving forward. Now, as she moves forward, we can see I've highlighted the back line shape, and as you can see, their wing backs have pushed really far forward, and at this point, it's really just the two central defenders, Corsi and Kendall Fletcher, I believe, and Kendall Fletcher or Lou Barnes. I can't remember off the top of my head. They've been switching around so much. But as you can see, the Portland Thorns attack is really trying to exploit that space. Bourrail is actually pointing at Haley Rezo out wide, and she really wants her to get forward into that space because they know they have numbers and advantage, If they can exploit that space in behind, that's going to create a dangerous opportunity. And when you get a team like Seattle who's very possession oriented, it's really key that you get your bread and butter goals off of turnovers and quick transitions like this, where you can catch them out of position. As the ball comes in, I have an arrow because I want her to go towards goal. The ball kind of gets hung up a little bit. She takes a bad touch and ends up tries to go across the defender to get towards goal. And as a striker, you really want to make sure that that touch is positive towards the goal, and you want to take away that option for the defender to cut in front of you and block your shot. So I was really frustrated when that came in, and she ended up cutting that ball back and kind of tried to cut across her defender instead of going directly at goal, and ended up being a shot that hits the backside of somebody and kind of harmlessly rolls to Kottmeyer. And that was kind of the story of the game, that the Thorns were they're looking for that transition play, but they're kind of lacking cohesion, I guess, up front, and spent a lot of time working on their defensive shape, which was great, and it really was effective in closing down Kim Little and the Seattle attack. This is in the second half. This is one of the only times that Kim Little got some space at the top of the box, and this ended up as a turnover. Barry Hill had come into the game, won the ball back, and immediately passed it back to Seattle, who turned in transition and find Kim Little in a pocket of space at the top of the box. And as you can see, the Portland defense is a little stretched out. That center back and the center back pairs are pretty far apart, Reynolds and Emily Menges. But you can also see that Meg Morris is tucked really far over, and she's really helpful in tracking back. And as we can see, Menges is going to do a great job. She's going to step forward and put pressure on Kim Little, force her wide. And Kim Little, at this point, she doesn't have her passing option to Matthias is gone, so she has to go forward into that space. And she actually has a really good look at a lot of space and behind, but Meg Morris has done really well at positioning herself as a good second defender. Your first defender puts immediate pressure. Your second defender drops off a little bit diagonally behind the first defender and provides that stable defensive shape. So she's helping, and then Burrell is also running backwards, and she's going to create a third person to try to track this run from Kim Little. And as we can see, if I don't click ahead too much, boom. Meg Morris, eventually Menges forces her wide, and the next person steps up, and it's Megan Morris, and she forces her wide as well, and it turns into a tame shot, which Betos collects, and really it highlighted that collective defending spirit from the Thorns on the day. Really was good at stifling out that Seattle attack. This is their most dangerous chance on the day, where it was cleared off the line. This is a set piece that essentially was a corner kick. And when you're facing a team that is very stout defensively and really focused on the defensive side of the game, set pieces are really important, because those are those can be some of your best opportunities to score a goal during the game. The U.S. the U.S. men's national team anyway, at the World Cups, that's kind of where they survived, is that a lot of times they weren't technically as good as their opponents, and so they were defending, and then all of a sudden they get one free set piece, and they would hit a ball on Bocanegra's head or on Yewu for a while there back in 2010, and that was the only way they could score a goal. So again, this is a team that's really beaten down the door, but at the same time can't break through. And this is another dangerous opportunity where you can get numbers forward into a dangerous area. And as we can see, though, Portland's really matched up pretty well here. Everyone's pretty closely marked. The only person I've kind of highlighted there at the far post is Keelan Winters, who's going to make a little bit of a diagonal run to the back post, but because the ball is going to go near post, she doesn't feature at all in this play. So the ball goes near post, Betos goes up and misjudges it. Kind of a mental lapse on her part. But at the same time, Portland's well prepared for the deflection. I believe that's Bev Yanez in the middle, is being marked by Catherine Reynolds, who is going to going to do well on this. And the ball does come into an area where she might be Bev Yanez might be able to attack it, but Reynolds sticks her foot out, and also Dagny Ringner's daughter is there as well to help clear that ball off the line. And when your goalkeeper makes a little bit of a mistake, it's great that they have 2 defenders on the line on this set piece to help clean things up and make sure that nothing goes in, and keep the score line at 0s. So, as we go forward a little bit more, here we are again, 77th minute. There's those 2 banks of 4 again, really stifling things out. There's not a lot of space between the lines. Everything is kept in front of them. There's not a lot of the people for Seattle are not making runs in between the lines anyway, and they're being effectively tracked. And so again, there's space wide and backwards, and that's where a lot of the play is going up and back and side to side anyway. And that's kind of the story of this game, was that Seattle had possession, but not in a dangerous space. And as we can see even further, this ball is a chance that I believe it's out of bounds for a throw in, and immediately all 11 players from Portland get back and start to defend this throw in. And, it really speaks to their collective defensive shape for the day, that they were really focused on keeping a 0 for the Seattle scoreline for the game. And so, fair play to them. This is a team that had 6 starters removed. They had people playing in new positions for the first time in this squad, and I believe they really stepped up and did an effective job. And, very much like the Sky Blue opening game, it was, that solid banks of 4, keeping things in front of them, keeping the play wide in non-dangerous areas of the field. Sky Blue took their chance. Maybe if Rezo scores that chance earlier on, it's a game like that where Seattle's chasing it versus, it's a kind of a damp squib in a way, and 0-0. So, it's a good point for Portland, not a great point for Seattle, and that's all she wrote. So not a lot this week, not a lot to analyze really, but for a Portland fan, you got to be happy with your reserve stepping up like that against the first team, Seattle. So no game next week, no Jake Take for the next week because we have no NWSL games. So I will be back on June 14. I'll be breaking down a very tasty little matchup there between Chicago Red Stars and the Portland Thorns, who, everyone should, I believe, have their players back, and it should be a full strength game. So thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed this Jake's Take, and hope you get a chance to watch the US-Japan games here tonight or on Sunday. I will be out in Cleveland, and hopefully we'll get a little bit of footage for that as well. So enjoy your weekend, and I will see you on the 14th.